Hello and welcome to How Azure Are You? The Unmatched Protection of Zerto for Microsoft Azure. Today's webinar is sponsored by Hewlett Packard Enterprise and Zerto and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great session, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of the event. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we're going to discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to a Zerto for Azure webpage, a link to a Zerto for Azure white paper, and a PDF about Zerto in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace. So I encourage you to access those resources now and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's panel discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Anthony Dutra, who's technical marketing engineer at HPE, and Bob Floyd, alliance architect at Zerto. Let me bring us all on camera and get started. Well, Bob and Anthony, thank you guys both so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Scott.
Thanks for having us, man. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. So, in our past episodes, we've talked a lot about the trends that we're seeing and the top threats that customers are facing. Can we quickly take a look at that and discuss how Zerto for Azure addresses those issues?
Yeah, I'll definitely kick it off. I think one of the evolving threats that we talked about last time in particular is ransomware in itself. And what we're seeing with a lot of organizations is that they want something that is not on premise to recover to. And they want to be sure that it is a stable environment that they're familiar with in order to, again, ensure business continuity using Zerto. So Zerto for Azure absolutely provides that straight out of the box. You're able to replicate and recover natively into Azure using all native Azure resources. And it's the same flavor of Zerto on premise, but now extended into the public cloud with Microsoft Azure.
Yeah. And, I mean, I think maybe people should understand some of the, the scope of some of the threats. Zerto was originally created as a disaster recovery tool. And when we say disaster, people think some type of a natural disaster. 61% of the disaster responses in the last year were triggered by some type of ransomware, not by some type of natural thing going on where your data center became unavailable. It's a situation where your data became unavailable. And your data center was physically fine. Ransomware is becoming a huge threat, and having that offsite, I don't want to say backup because Zerto is not a backup solution. Having that offsite data available to spin back up for production purposes almost immediately has become not insurance, but a necessity, an absolute necessity.
That's a good point, Bob, because I think we see on average, I think it's like 1 month to recover from a ransomware attack. So it's extremely slow. Having Zerto be that sort of DVR-like rollback is really, really nice to recover so quickly from. And then it helps you also kind of stay in compliance. I I just got off another webinar where we were talking about, ensuring HIPAA regulations or SOX compliance. This recoverability, helps check those boxes if you are looking for things like cyber insurance, etc. So,
and for those people out there that think, hey, I can fix this. We've got a budget for paying the ransom. I mean, that's just right. That's a solution, right? We'll just pay the ransom and solve the problem and get a key and recover everything. The facts don't really back up that being a tremendously viable solution. Only 4% or so of those who actually pay the ransom get all of their data back in a usable type of a circumstance. And if you don't get 100% of your data back, did you get what you quote unquote paid for? The answer is no. You're much better off trying to take care of yourself and actually protecting yourself. It's not, you can't you can't rely on the generosity of thieves, guys. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work well. So, and again, I mean, I think we've probably said this in past webinars with you, Scott, but it's not a matter of if you're going to get hit anymore. It is a matter now of when you will get hit, and it doesn't matter who you are. Just as a real world kind of an example, I have friends that ran a comic book shop up the road from me. I've known them for 25 years. They were the victims of ransomware attack. Now they're not an enterprise looking for an enterprise solution like Zerto, but size doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're a Fortune 50 company or a mom and pop shop. It's coming to get you sooner or later, and you need to be thinking about a solution before you need it.
Yeah. No, great points. What was that percentage, Bob, that you mentioned? Did you say 4% of
Only
the
4% of people that pay actually get their data back. Yeah, that was a mind-boggling statistic when I saw it the first time around.
Yeah. So, customers have access to, a lot of different options when it comes to the cloud. When it comes to security, what would you say is the biggest differentiator for Azure?
Well, first of all, I mean, Azure's owned and operated by Microsoft. And, I have had the pleasure of working with Microsoft for about 20 years now. And a lot of my job prior to coming to Zerto had to deal with security. I can honestly say that I'm not sure I have ever worked with another vendor that takes security as seriously as Microsoft does. I realize that, every other day there's something in the headlines about a Windows hack out there. But when you understand exactly how broad Windows is in terms of use in the professional world, um, it's the biggest target by far. I mean, I don't know what recent statistics are. I wish I could quote recent statistics, but at one point in time when I was doing security updates as a vendor working with Microsoft on their operating systems, it was like 90% of all business systems out there were Windows-based systems. Now that's been over a decade ago, so I don't know what the numbers are today, but nobody takes it more seriously than Microsoft does. And I don't care how big your company is, you don't have as many people on your security team as Azure does taking care of the customers that are in Azure. The security protocols and procedures that go on there are a little crazy, right down to, I'd say a little crazy. There's nothing crazy in the security world anymore. I shouldn't say that because it makes it sound like it's not a positive. It is a positive. In this case, going crazy is a positive. You can't be too careful with it. And I mean, right down to and including Zerto software. So when I update Zerto software on Azure, on the Azure marketplace, which we'll talk more about in a minute, but when I update that marketplace software, they run it through a scan and they come back to me and say, hey, you're missing this CVE, or this CVE is going to go out of date in 2 months. Are you sure you don't want to update it now? I mean, they're very careful about this kind of stuff. And you've got a whole army of security people working on the background for you just for the cost of running your Azure environment. And I don't think a lot of people quite realize that.
The only thing I would add on top of that, I think, is just to Microsoft's point, just for Azure itself, is its adoptability, not only within the security tools that you can integrate within it itself, but it's fairly easy to get started with using it conceptually, maybe compared to other public cloud vendors, at least in my opinion. I've certified all three clouds. What I like about Azure is just how it is, how the services are broken out, how they are leveraged. And I think Bob already mentioned the marketplace. They do a really good job with, leveraging credits that you might have, be good with spend and stuff like that. So it's a lot of cool different things within Azure itself that I think makes it unique for, both DR as well, or just a spot to migrate to as well.
Okay. All right. So I think you guys have both made a pretty good case for, Azure as a secure solution. Um, how does the Zerto solution add to the strength of Azure security?
Yeah, go ahead, but you take that one.
Oh, no, go for it, Anthony.
I was just going to say it adds that much needed layer of recoverability. So I'm sure we'll dive more into what it does we'll show exactly what it does overall. But if you are looking for a disaster recovery software or even a migration software of moving your on premise virtual machines into the purpose built into Azure, using again Azure services and technologies natively, then Zerto is that tool for you, easy, right out the box. It being in the marketplace today, again, adds that layer of availability to people so they can adopt it very quickly and get things spun up, all the Zerto components spun up and going in just, a matter of minutes, rather than having, an extensive deployment time to migrate some VMs. So again, that adding that layer of recoverability and then all the other sort of advanced cyber capabilities that are built into it as well, which make it very interesting.
Yeah, I'd add to that Zerto plays into the shared responsibility model of the Azure public cloud very well. For those that aren't familiar with the shared responsibility model, effectively what that means is Microsoft Azure is responsible for everything you can't get to with your keyboard. So physical security of the data center that you're working out of is their responsibility. Power into the data center, AC for the data center, the physical racks and servers and cabling is all their responsibility. Your data, on the other hand, is something you can get to with your keyboard. Therefore, it is your responsibility. So Zerto is that added layer of protection for you to maintain immediately usable copies of your data, either in Azure for recoverability from an on-premise situation, or in another region of Azure for recoverability for your production applications that are running in Azure. I hear from customers all the time, hey man, I don't need to mess with this. I moved to the cloud because the cloud's going to, I wanted to be out of the backup, disaster recovery, data protection business, and Azure's got me covered. Well, yeah, do they really? I mean, come on. The shared responsibility model leaves that in your court. You're responsible for taking care of it. And if you're not using Zerto or something like Zerto, and your Azure region goes down, you lose access to it. And that's your responsibility. I mean, Microsoft's going to feel sorry for you, but they don't have any answers for you because they told you up front that you're responsible for taking care of your data. So having something like Zerto to replicate that data out to a separate location so that you can recover there when something happens to your primary is of extreme importance. And I want to circle back. Anthony said something a second ago about migration. I think people forget how big Zerto is in the migration world. There are a lot of people that are trying to figure out where they want to run from at the moment, and they're migrating from place to place. And if you're looking to get into Azure and move your applications into Azure, there probably isn't a better solution on the market anywhere for moving whole applications at once as an application, because applications are really complicated these days, right? They're not a single virtual machine. They're multiple machines. They're made up of a database, an application server, usually some type of web front end. And if you've got a lot of users using it, then you've got multiple servers running that web front end. You may have brokers involved, and I mean, the list goes on, right? I think even the simplest applications out there are probably 3 or 4 virtual machines minimum. How do you migrate all of that at once and make sure you do it intact? Zerto is purpose built to move we talk about protecting virtual machines, but the reality is it's purpose built to protect your application and move your application as a single unit from point A to point B, and nothing does it better.
Hey, so speaking of that, nothing does it better. What are some of the main differentiators of the Zerto for Azure solution against your competition?
I'll start. There are quite a bit, especially when it comes to, well, I think the main thing is just its purpose, right? So I'll quickly share my screen here because I think Bob was mentioning it, before. There is really no other solution from a continuous data protection standpoint at that, hypervisor level, virtual machine level that provides this level of flexibility, of recoverability across Azure, no matter how you kind of want to use it. So again, we were mentioning from a migration standpoint, I am done with VMware on premise. I want to move some VMs to Microsoft Azure. You can do so with Zerto. Disaster recovery to Azure itself, right? In case you just want to use it as a DR target, you can do so. But once you are actually in Microsoft Azure, you can still leverage Zerto to replicate between regions within the platform itself. So compared to sort of anything else out there, you look at Zerto again operating much more at the VM and you can say sort of conceptually the application level. The way it uses CDP to replicate and move these applications out of Azure and between regions is very seamless, and it's all intuitive through the same single platform overall. So yeah, that's in my opinion what makes us a little bit different. Bob, I'm not sure if you want to.
What I want to expand on is something you said. I mean, you mentioned CDP. For those of you out there that may be new to Azure or new to Zerto, be it Zerto on-prem or Zerto in Azure, we use continuous data protection, which Anthony shortened down to CDP. And you'll hear all us Zertonians shorten it to CDP. And a lot of times we forget that you folks don't necessarily know our shorthand for things, but CDP is effectively what drives the entire solution. And what CDP is a process of continuously replicating your data as it is being written to storage locally. We're replicating it to the target site. So it's all happening. I don't want to say synchronously, but near synchronous replication. And it allows you to have RPOs or recovery point objectives within seconds. You've got checkpoints every 5, 7, 10, 15 seconds, depending upon the pipe that's available and the amount of data that you're replicating throughout whatever your allotted time frame is. And Zerto will do replication windows of 4 hours to 30 days. So I can set up a specific application to be protected for 7 days, and Zerto is gonna write a checkpoint every 5 to 15 seconds over the course of that 7-day period, and then it's going to start over again. And I can pick any moment in time to do my recovery. So if something like ransomware were to strike at 10 a.m. in the morning, I can roll back to 9:55 and 55 seconds a.m., bring everything up in a clean room, clean the virus itself off pre-encryption, and then relaunch into my production environment. And it's a very different solution from what just about anybody else on the market is doing. A lot of disaster recovery it's technology that started life as a backup solution, and it relies on some type of snapshot technology, which may take a snapshot every 12 hours. Well, that's great unless your snapshot is 11 hours old. And now I've lost 11 hours worth of data. I can tell you from having worked with some major companies here in the United States that 11 hours of data can be tens of millions of dollars lost. It's just gone. Think for a moment, if you're in the airline industry, 11 hours of data is 11 hours of flight reservations. How much time and energy are you going to have to put back into taking care of the customers whose reservations were lost? How much goodwill have you given up, and what is that for you in terms of expense? Whereas if you've got a solution in place like Zerto, you pick your moment in time, you roll back to it, you bring your production environment back up, and maybe you lose minutes of information instead of hours of information. And there just aren't really any competitors to what Zerto does like that at the scale that Zerto does it, because we're designed to be used at scale. Another one of those advantages over our competitors is we're not reliant on agents. There's nothing to install on your local virtual machines. We set up at the hypervisor level. We read all the data at the hypervisor level. And we replicate at that level. That does two things for you. Number one, it saves you time on installation, and it saves you time in management for your VMs, because you don't have to update agents when Zerto comes out with a new version. There's no messing around with any of that kind of stuff. It's very easy to handle when we've got something new. The second thing that it does for you is it reduces your vulnerable footprint to things that are trying to take over your virtual machines. One of the very first things any virus is going to do is try to establish command and control of your virtual machine. And when it does that, it's going to disable any agents running on the machine that may handle backup and data replication. Or it's going to reset your native settings. Maybe your settings are a snapshot every 1 hour. And it resets your settings to a snapshot every 1 year, and you don't know that it's done that. The hour comes and goes, and you don't have a new snapshot. But because Zerto's not running in the virtual machine, viruses that infect your environment can't find us. So, there's a couple of things in there that are really, really important in terms of how we function in a secure environment. So.
All right. Excellent. We've heard you talk a lot about the marketplace and the shift in how customers are choosing to procure. Um, Maybe you can, reiterate some of that, like what those trends are, and then I'd love to hear about your offerings and capabilities in the Azure marketplace.
Yeah, so all of the major public clouds are putting forth their own marketplaces, places for you to go and buy directly through Azure, right? To deploy in Azure. And there's some real advantages to this. First of all, you've got vendors like Zerto that are going to work with Microsoft to put forth a solution that can be deployed straight out of Azure that's acceptable to Microsoft. It allows you one-stop shopping as far as your bill is concerned. I mean, you're already being billed through Azure, right? Whatever you use with Microsoft is coming to you in a monthly bill in a consumption-based model, so an OpEx type model, which a lot of accounting departments are a whole lot happier with than a CapEx type model today. The other thing is Microsoft is going to offer you some fairly significant incentives to purchase through Azure Marketplace. Most large customers, actually not even large customers, there's some mid-sized businesses out there that are doing this. You're probably signing a long-term committed spend agreement. In the Microsoft world, it's Microsoft Azure committed consumption. It's MAC, MACC, and I think it's consumption commit or committed consumption. There we go. You're signing that MAC agreement, right? And that's going to get you better pricing on all of your Microsoft services. But you're also committing to spend X amount of dollars over a certain amount of time. If you don't actually reach that commitment in consumed Microsoft services, you're going to pay the bill anyway. So you're buying air effectively if you don't actually buy enough services, use enough in Microsoft services to reach that commit limit. What Microsoft is saying to you is, all right, you've committed to spend $10 million over the next 4 years. That's great. We're going to give you a deal on that. You get to the last, 4 months of it, and you've only spent $8 million. You're going to write a $2 million check, whether you buy $2 million worth of stuff or not. If you purchase through the marketplace, Microsoft will give you 100% credit on that expenditure against your committed spend. So let's use my example of $10 million over 4 years. You get down to the last 6 months and you still got $2 million to spend. Granted, this would be a really big deal, but if you were to buy $1 million worth of Zerto, they would take $1 million off your committed spend. Mm-hmm. If you bought $2 million worth of anything out of the Azure marketplace, they would give you credit for all $2 million and you would have met your contractual commitment to Microsoft. So it's, in a way, it's you're committing, but you're almost like getting stuff. I don't want to say getting it for free, but it's a really good deal in the long term. And a lot of companies sign committed spend agreements to get a better deal on their services, and then end up having to try and make that up somewhere. And the easiest way to do it is to find a vendor like Zerto who has a product you want, a product that will solve a problem for you, and buy it through Azure Marketplace.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's so funny. We hear so much of the time that disaster recovery, backup, whatever you want, business continuity is such last of mind for so many folks. If you have that leftover spend in the marketplace, you're already committed to it. You're kind of doing yourself a disservice anyways of not protecting yourself, of just kind of looking something up to add to that spend. So yeah, you are kind of losing money, and even potentially, more catastrophically losing money and losing your apps. So good point. Yeah.
And I alluded to it earlier. When you're getting software through Azure Marketplace, you're getting software that Microsoft has taken a look at too, right? It's not just the vendor. In a lot of cases, customers will, vendors. Obviously, I have a reason to try and sell you my product, but Microsoft doesn't necessarily have a reason to try and sell you my product. And the fact that Microsoft puts it in their marketplace is something of also a Microsoft stamp of approval. They have taken a look at it, and what they're saying to you is, we have confidence in this product. I don't mean to say that they have confidence we'll do what we say we'll do. What they mean is, we've run it through our scanners and whatnot. You're not getting bad software. You're not going to install stuff that's going to do bad things in your environment. As opposed to you going out and finding a third-party solution somewhere else and installing it on your own in Azure. You don't have that same level of confidence. Microsoft hasn't stamped it and said, hey, look, this has been approved by us, and we're willing to offer it publicly under our header. That's a big deal. And lastly, deployment. Right, we've written Azure Resource Management scripts, or ARM templates for short, to help you install Zerto. Here in a few minutes, when we get around to the demo stuff, I'm going to run through an install and show you just how easy it is, how quick the whole thing can happen. But you can be up and running with a Zerto solution deployed out of Azure Marketplace in a matter of minutes, and that probably isn't going to happen if you have to deploy something manually from someone who's not in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's excellent. It reminds me of the old days. I covered Microsoft for a long time, like back in the Windows 2000 launch period. And, there were all those certified apps, and companies went through a lot of hoops to get their apps certified for those platforms. And it sounds like the process is similar in the marketplace, where they're, Microsoft is kicking the tires on the app and making sure that it's, certainly at a ground level, not going to screw up the Azure environment in any way, but then, also that it's, secure and those kind of things. So it's really interesting.
Nice callback, man. I'd totally forgotten about Microsoft certified applications. I used to have to work with those too, Scott. Yeah. That's a nice analogy.
So, nothing resonates more with customers than, real life examples. Can you guys provide any examples of the Zerto and Azure solution?
Would you like me to pull up the example, Bob? You cool with me sharing that story?
Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our best and probably most I would like to say famous internally example of this is with Gray County. So this is government industry, obviously. I mean, the county, Gray County, in the southern region of Ontario, Canada. And what they were really looking for is that sort of best of breed solution that is going to allow you that operationally efficient recoverability to be met with the ease of use and adoption of Microsoft Azure in a simple way. So their objective, I mean, I won't read it out there, is they were looking to sort of expand a project within the next 5 years. Something that was going to meet those critical RPOs for their systems. It could be no longer than just a couple of hours of downtime. And this is because these are applications, virtual machines servicing critical services like ambulances and other very important things within the county itself. So they were looking for that disaster recovery solution that was both flexible and, again, required that operational efficiency to get back online now. And Zerto was that solution overall. I think what one of the teams that we worked with, again, showing it a testament to the number of partners that Zerto has as well. We worked with CDW in order to, create a strategy and have something that meets their needs. And I think what it basically came out to was a Zerto installation on-prem into Azure and back and forth. And it was installed online in less than a week. So they got the RTOs and RPOs that they were looking for out of the solution. And they realized the cost savings, again, maybe from the Azure perspective, mostly taking advantage of those credits, taking advantage of just, the pay-as-you-go format within Azure itself in order to, reach the outcome that they did today. Any other colorful commentary there, Bob?
No, man, I think you covered all of it. Fantastic. What I will say is that, just to kind of marry the last question and this one together. So you can deploy into Azure Gov from Marketplace now.
Oh,
So just because you're a government entity like Gray County here, you can get the same exact advantages of Marketplace while deploying in a more secure government cloud with Azure, and you can do it all out of Marketplace. So something to keep in mind.
yes. And I do love their requirement there. Satisfy taxpayers with a solution that maximizes. I hope Zerto checked that box. I really do.
Very
Awesome.
nice.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and so before we get to Q&A, you guys have been teasing some demos, so we'd love to see that.
Awesome. Do we want to start with kind of just what it would look like overall if you were to deploy a Zerto solution in Azure?
Sure. You want me to run through the deployment real quick?
Yeah, I will. Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, you can start with that.
Or what? Well, it's up to you, man.
I was gonna go to, if we could, the architecture first. Maybe we give
Okay.
people a high level of what will be deployed. So we will quickly show what an architecture looks like with Zerto and within Azure itself. So
Okay.
what you'll see within our demo is in a vCenter environment, we're going to have some virtual machines running on premise, basic file server, a couple of ERP virtual machines, just what you would see as basic workloads on premise. And what we'll be doing is we already have Zerto installed on premise, protecting some virtual machines, and we'll see the replication happening and failover things of that nature to Azure publicly to this other site. So Bob's going to be walking through what the deployment of the Zerto Cloud Appliance or ZCA looks like within the Azure Marketplace. Zerto on-prem is already set up. Again, as Bob alluded to before, no agents installed on each of the virtual machines. Everything is installed at the, again, hypervisor layer, and Zerto can see everything that's happening in the hosts and everything that's happening within Azure and those APIs as well, because we are so created together. I will switch over to.
Hang on. Keep it there for just a second.
Sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. You're fine. I would point out real quick, if you look at the Azure side of that diagram, there in the DR IaaS box, the only thing running is a VRA. We are not replicating to live running virtual machines. So for those of you out there cringing over the cost of duplicating your mission critical applications from on-prem to Azure, we're really only moving data. So Zerto is not an active or even an active passive solution. We're an active to data solution, and then the data gets converted into a disk that gets attached to an Azure virtual machine at the time of failover. So we're not currently using any compute, any memory in Azure. All we're using is blob storage and a little bit of networking. So from the standpoint of using Azure as a DR target, Zerto is a really cost-effective solution, as opposed to trying to stand up your own secondary data center in another, geographical location. This gives you the possibility of parking your data wherever you need to do for production purposes, but at a relatively reduced cost compared to running your own data center or running an active solution where you might have your second active set in Azure and you're using compute consumption, right? So just one thing to point out there.
And that's a good point. That actually leads nicely into the demo itself. As Bob was alluding to, right, you are protecting your virtual machines, let's say on premise, into Azure, but just because you were doing so, there's nothing live and active until you hit that failover button, and then it comes back on, then it comes online. So you're not paying for anything, nothing's running up there. It's only good to go when you need it to go. So here we are actually within the Zerto dashboard itself, but this is our vSphere client, our vCenter environment with all of our mission critical virtual machines running, our file server, our social media website, and a couple of other applications that we have. Within Zerto itself, we have what are called virtual protection groups protecting these applications. And you can see we already have some replicating already to Microsoft Azure. And what we'll do within this demo is show very briefly how, what it looks like sort of from a perspective how Zerto is leveraging the native Azure resources by creating a VPG. So let's just quickly create a VPG to say, hey, we want to protect our now file server to Microsoft Azure. And what you see me sort of quickly click through is that Zerto can actually protect virtual machines from 1 to many sites up to 3 sites in total. So that could be replicating locally, that could be replicating to a remote site, and that could be replicating to Azure all at the same time. Staggering those different SLAs to provide, maybe different layers of recoverability. But in this case, what we're doing is telling Zerto, hey, we want to now protect that file server VM and replicate it into Azure itself. Alongside replicating it on premise locally and to a remote site as well using Zerto. So we choose the VM we want to protect. We say where we want to send it off to, Microsoft Azure in this case. A recovery VRA will be selected for you. This is automatic and things that are spun up within Microsoft Azure that you do not have to necessarily worry about. These are what is doing the replication between both of the sites. So that will be pre-selected for you. This is the journal history that Bob mentioned earlier, up to, 4 hours to 30 days that you can retain the sort of replicas of this virtual machine. So very expansive there. And then some other alerts and reminders for if you need to do some compliance testing and things of that nature. We'll keep everything to continuous sync, but this is really where Zerto allows you the options to choose natively what you want to use in Azure itself. So obviously you're going to need things set up already like your VNets, your subnets, resource groups to fail over into. And all you're going to do now from creating VPG is select what you want to use. So in our case, we want to select the particular subnet that we want to fail over into. We definitely don't want to use SSDs because that's going to rank up our bill. So we want to switch to hard HDDs. And again, I'm doing so if you do a failover or move live. So this is, okay, we're failing over live or we're migrating everything into Azure. This is all the stuff that we want this VM to spin up into and use. And then the same thing if you're doing a failover test of the instance. So you can choose the instance size, the family, the storage, etc., etc. So very customizable when you are leveraging Zerto there. And then another very important feature and tool set is the ability to re-IP as well. So when you do hit that failover button in Azure, it can spin up this virtual instance with that IP address that you've designated for Zerto to sort of help with, again, getting back online as operationally efficient as possible. Maybe you can then now point your DNS server to Azure, that same address, and you're still servicing your application is still servicing your end users with minimal disruption. So again, just another layer of capability of how Zerto makes disaster recovery easy overall. So that would be setting up a VPG, but we already do have a VPG set up for our new social application that we have running on premise here. And what we want to do is just do a failover test of this application in case something happens, and maybe we have a compliance report coming up that we have to check and see how fast that this would work. So we simply come down here to the left, click failover test. You'll see in this case that we've already selected the virtual protection group that we want to fail over. If you do want to fail over just a specific virtual machine itself, you can narrow it down as well within the VPG. But in this case, we're just going to fail over this one virtual machine in a test. Here are the checkpoints that we were just talking about, that continuous data protection DVR-like function for you to roll back to. Literally 5-10 second checkpoints of these replicas. Very, very cool. If you have certain security tools that you want to send API calls and tag particular checkpoints, you can do so with Zerto as well. Completely integratable from an open API standpoint to sort of make this even more impressive. So we just select the checkpoint that we want to roll back to, click next, and click start failover test. Now, the first thing that you will notice is when you jump over to your production environment is that nothing is happening to your new social application VM running on premise. Zerto is not shutting this down. It's not doing anything to it to do this failover test. As a matter of fact, you can leave that running. And in time, what we'll see within the Azure console here is the both resource group and the VM coming online within Microsoft Azure. So, we'll give this a little bit time to propagate, but you're already seeing the resource group has been created. And what we'll soon see too is that the virtual machine will come into that as well. But maybe while we're letting that run, Bob, you want to go into showing Azure, Zerto in the Azure Marketplace and how that got set up?
Sure. If you want to, there we go. Awesome. All right. So we're looking at my personal Azure portal here. To get to Marketplace, I'm just going to hit Dashboard at the bottom. And then there is a Marketplace option on my dashboard. When I get to the Marketplace, I am simply going to search for Zerto. And as you can tell from my drop down, I've done this once or twice. I'm going to select the main Zerto tab here that says Zerto and the Azure application. And I'm going to hit the drop down menu. You're going to see these top 5 options here. You're going to see odds are pretty good. What you want is Azure is the Zerto Linux ZCA DR. If you're looking at this new and you're new to Zerto, when you get around to doing this, it's probable that you'll be transacting with us, which means this is what you'll be doing through Marketplace. Transacting through Marketplace. I'm going to hit create. This is going to pull up the Azure Resource Manager template that Zerto has pre-configured to help you deploy the software. I'm just going to deploy into my main subscription, and I'm going to pick my DR resource group to deploy into. I'm going to leave it in US East. I've got to give it a name. My application needs a name, so I'm going to call it Zerto DR. I'm going to leave the managed resource group name the same in this case. Just take the defaults. However, for you guys out there that have very specific naming conventions that you need for your resource groups, this is modifiable. You do not have to, you do have to deploy a managed resource group during deployment of Zerto. However, you can modify this name to use whatever naming convention you need. That's fine. I'm going to leave my virtual machine name and my Azure resource machine name the same. That's fine. I'm going to give it a default username and password. And I'm going to click next. And we're going to set up our virtual networks here. By default, it gives you the option for 2 subnets. I only need 1 in this case, so we're just going to configure 1. I have an existing virtual network that I'm going to use with existing subnets. Now, because I'm deploying this as a managed application, I do have to give my managed application a managed identity to allow it to have permissions to manage the network. I've already configured a managed identity, and the odds are if you guys have been using Azure for very long, you'll have a managed identity you can use for this. This is my DR management identity, and I'm just going to add that straight to my managed application, which gives it permissions to my network. I do not want a public IP address in this case, so I'm going to leave no selected. But if you need a public IP for Zerto, you can give it one right here. If I click next, now I'm into review and create. And once this is fully prepped, it gives me the option to review everything. And then I just hit the create button at the bottom if I'm happy with it all. Now we've initialized our deployment, and the deployment is already into process. The whole thing happens really quick. I say really quick. I mean, it depends on what's really quick in your world, right?
It is though, right?
But
Compared to like a yeah.
yeah, for those of us that have deployed Zerto manually before, I can say that this is really quick. If you're expecting this to happen as fast as you walking into the kitchen and getting a cup of coffee, maybe not. However, 2 cups of coffee, you know, it really won't take that long, probably less than 2-3 minutes. And trust me, I test this often enough. When we're updating things, I watch it happen. It'll blow through pretty relatively quickly, and then you're up and running with Zerto.
So we can see that the failover test has initiated, and Zerto is now basically telling us, hey, to make sure everything looks good and stop the test so we can clean everything up for you. We jump over to our vSphere environment vCenter and see that our new social app that the failover test is being operated on is not being touched at all. And within Microsoft Azure itself, in its own resource group, running as a virtual machine instance with this testing recovery tag is the new social application that you can go into. And if you set the IP address, that would be here as well. All of that is running automatically for you within Microsoft Azure. So to stop the test, we're going to hit the stop button. You can, if something wasn't good, tag the test notes to, signify that and click stop. And what Zerto is going to do on the back end is shut all of this down for you from the Azure side of things. So you'll see the why I click this, but the new social app shut down, the resource group deleting in itself, and you not having to do anything or worry about you left something running within Microsoft Azure because of that failover test. So super operationally efficient, just a few simple clicks of a button to get to and from Azure itself.
And to be clear, Anthony was running a failover test. That failover test is fully usable. You can right. Actually, I mean, you're failing over an application there. If you need to test the application to determine usability, that failover test gives you that capability. Everything is up and running as long as you've got any external resources outside the application available, like domain controllers to authenticate your login to the application. You can actually test the application and potentially even do test development on that application right there in that environment. So Zerto's not just giving you a way to test the failover. Zerto's giving you a way to verify that the failover actually gives you the capability that you want to achieve, right? Which is a usable production environment following the need to fail over. And for you guys that have never tested your disaster recovery solution, let me politely suggest that you don't actually have a solution. You've got a plan, but you don't know whether or not it'll work. If you're not testing it on a regular basis, you're kind of hoping, so just food for thought.
No, great points. Yeah, so we'll let that failover test stop, but any other?
Yeah, really, really enlightening demo there. Appreciate those. And Bob, I couldn't agree with you more on the if you haven't tested your plan, it's just a plan. It's not a solution. Well, let's hop over into some audience questions if you guys are ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good.
Okay, and yeah, we've got a few here that are ready to go with. Let's see. This one, with Zerto for Azure, can I fail over between different regions?
Yeah. Yep. I'm here for sure. Definitely, you can. I think Bob and I mentioned it a little bit earlier in our conversation, but the whole point of the disaster recovery, both from on-premise into Microsoft Azure, and then once you are actually in Azure, is the same exact Zerto software that you can put in another region and replicate those VMs between multiple different regions.
Okay, excellent. Next one here, does Zerto offer anything to protect other Microsoft services like Microsoft 365 or Entra ID?
So that's good, Bob.
I was just going to say, Zerto does offer a SaaS solution that's usable for protecting your O365 environments, backing up your user profiles. I say backing up. Setting up your user profiles for disaster recovery environments or ransomware recovery at the same time. So yeah, we do have a product for O365. What was that second product you mentioned, Scott? The service?
Entra ID. It's Azure Active Directory. Microsoft renamed back in March.
Yeah, of course, and that's the same service that would do that as well. So.
Okay, cool, excellent. Next one here, they're wondering. Let's say I want to replicate from AWS to Azure. Can I do so with Zerto?
Very good question, and the answer is you actually can. So you can set up a VPG if you're running Zerto for AWS. In there, you can set up a VPG between Azure and AWS, and you can do the replication between the two. It's not very common at all, I'll be honest, and it can be, just something that isn't quite frequently done.
Okay, excellent. Another one here, does HPE GreenLake for disaster recovery support Microsoft Azure?
Oh, great question. Yeah, because, basically HPE GreenLake for disaster recovery is Zerto very much on the back end, but it's still, from a cloud perspective, is all management through the GreenLake console. So that actually now does support Microsoft Azure as a DR target, where you can, if you are using that service, pretty much do something similar to what we've shown here on premise.
Okay. Well, looks like we're almost up on time here, but just, if somebody wants to get started with Zerto or find out more, do you guys have any recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I'm just definitely going to push our hands-on labs. So feel free to go to, just Google Zerto hands-on labs. You can sign up to them for free. Play with Zerto for Azure for yourself.
And you can always go to Zerto.com for more immediate information. And there's there's an information box there where you can fill out your information, and somebody from Zerto will absolutely get back to you to discuss your disaster recovery or migration needs with regard to Azure or any other platform that we support, and be happy to answer all your questions, give you a demo, set you up with a trial if need be. There are a lot of different options there, but yep.
Excellent. Well, Bob, Anthony, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a lot of fun. Really interesting conversation. Really appreciate your time.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
You.
And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank HPE and Zerto for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.